Well, good morning. I'm very pleased to welcome you at the Pontifical Academy of Science. Special welcome to you, Eminence Cardinal Ray, for your inspiring introductions. We do address, and that's what I like with this conference, the olive tree, the olive oil as an object of science, but we also address it as a plant, a special plant that has intrinsic value, that has holy symbolism, and it is part of evolution and creation. So you're dealing with a very complex issue from a health and from a nature perspective. I really appreciate the questions which you, Walter, put before this conference. I hope they get answered. I will talk about the olive in the food system, and I will also, in the end of my talk, address the issue that we are currently living in a food crisis, in a very serious food crisis, hunger crisis. And we in the Pontifical Academy of Sciences cannot have a meeting on food neglecting the current situation of the food system from an environmental and from a health and from a poverty perspective. This graphic gives you a perspective on food system. We developed that in the context of the last year's United Nations Food Systems Summit. I was chair of the scientific group of the UN Secretary General, and you can imagine it was quite a discussion to come to a concept, an agreed concept in a large group of scientists of how do you define a food system. It has connections to the health system already addressed by Walter, the ecology and climate system, the science and innovation system, and the economics and the governance. Internally, the linkages we need to consider are consumption, nutrition and health, agriculture, food industries, markets, and income and employment. So interlinked. This is a fairly simplified system description. Where's the olive in this system? It's of course part of production, part of consumption, it's marketed. It generates income in farming households. It has aspects of safety and diversity, and it has health aspects. Food systems are global, regional, national, and local, and any attempt to change them should reflect their uniqueness resulting from traditions, cultures, economic structures, and ecologies of location. This is, I'm pleased to see also the concept of your workshop. We need to be clear what we mean when we talk about a healthy diet. The nutrition experts in the scientific group came to this conclusion for defining healthy diet. A healthy diet is one that is human health promoting and disease preventing. It provides adequacy without excess of nutrients from foods that are nutritious and healthy and avoids the introduction of health-harming substances. Well, it took months that the leading nutrition scientists which we had were able to settle on this still disputed definition. Even more disputed was what is a sustainable diet. Healthy diets must be affordable, culturally acceptable, and originate from sustainable production. So this much on definition. We had a large research effort in the last 2 years, which continues on what is the true cost of food. This workshop focuses very much, and I appreciate that, on benefit of healthy food, especially olive oil. And I appreciate that. But our food system in the world has large indirect costs. The gray part of the column down there is $9 trillion per annum. That's what food costs in the market and in the restaurants and elsewhere. The green column is the environmental cost of the food system, about $8 trillion per annum. The blue part of the column, and these are preliminary estimates, probably conservative estimates, are the costs to human health because of unhealthy diets, diets not affordable, healthy diets not affordable by about 3 billion people, cause adverse health effects, about $11 trillion per annum. So the food in the markets are not reflecting the true cost of food. The pricing of food and the indirect effects need to be reconsidered. We cannot talk about healthy diets and sustainable food systems without addressing the issue of food losses and food waste. Pope Francis has spoken to that issue very clearly. I proudly point at our book, which we produced here in such a workshop 3 years ago, which won a book award in the Gourmand Prize in Paris as best book on reducing food waste last year. So what I put there in the middle is numbers from Italy. Italian consumers and the food system in Italy continues to waste as much food as many other European countries. So healthy Mediterranean diet does not go along with, so far, with reduced waste of food. I know these are two very different issues. So Germans waste as much food or a little bit more than Italians. We need to address this. Good food tends to be wasted less. Costly, good food tends to be wasted less. Restaurants are accounting about half of food waste. These are the 7 science and innovation proposals by the scientific group for the United Nations Food System Summit, which was last year. And there will be a follow-up process by the UN Secretary General next year. So this goes on. We focus on hunger, de-risking food system, land credit and labor arrangements, bioscience innovations, the sustainable use of soils, land, water, and the genetic base, and fisheries, aquaculture, and digital innovation. Protecting the genetic base of the great diversity of the olive tree, I think, needs to be on our agenda. Let me come more clearly to food systems and the olive tree. In the literature, the sustainability of olive oil systems is increasingly researched, well-researched. I summarized this from one source, which is listed below. What are sustainable approaches to the olive oil system in production, in processing, in the use of olive wastewater? So we have to have the whole olive production processing chain in perspective when talking about sustainable approaches. We need sustainability thinking around the olive oil production and processing system. Climate change, drought stress, and pathogens threaten the olive. I hope this group of experts can address it. The olive is under threat from climate change. Walter mentioned that already. in broad terms. There are new agents moving into the olive groves which need to be controlled. So plant breeding, resistance to drought and to pathogens is important on the science agenda for the olive in the future. We want to see the olive also in the next 1,000 years. So long-term thinking is required. The olive sector is not only part of the food system, it's part of a larger bioeconomy, because the olive has and the olive tree has interesting byproducts. So harmful waste produced in the Mediterranean olive sector can be converted into a usefully applied biomass, which is currently undervalued. For instance, from the olive tree's leaves and byproducts, bio-based materials can be used to change the leather production sector into a less wasteful and harmful production process. So you use the ingredients from the olive sector, the byproducts, to produce bio-based leather processing. That is spreading quite quickly. So look at all what the olive tree gives us, and not only at the oil, would be the conclusion. Here are from a source which I think is solid, all the aspects from bioenergy to purified water and so on to cosmetics, what the olive tree gives us. I told you I cannot sit with you without addressing what the world currently is deeply troubled by. As a consequence of the food system disruptions of the COVID crisis, and as a consequence, coming on top of it, the war inflicted by Russia on Ukraine, disrupting food trade and food production systems. This list of bullet points gives you the aspects of food systems not serving people and planet. And Walter mentioned already, for instance, the obesity aspect. But we have the micronutrient deficiencies, the unsafe food. 10% of the world eat unsafe food because of poverty. The high food losses I mentioned, the environmental destruction I mentioned, and the food economy is responsible for about 30% of greenhouse gas emissions. So the food system is not only suffering from climate change and climate disruptions, it's also contributing to it, putting it in a very complex situation. When we look at the key role of vegetable oils in consumption, the olive is the final blue-colored, light blue-colored element of the overall vegetable oil consumption. You see, overall, the vegetable oil consumption increases. The olive is a very minor aspect, a minor component of all vegetable oils consumed. An important one. It's this sector is largely growing through palm oil, soybean, and rapeseed oil. We have a curious situation in the current food crisis. Look at the right-hand side of the graph. The green line gives you the price developments of vegetable oils in the last few years. It's shooting up in 2020, 21, and 22. About a tripling of cooking oil prices in the market. Look at the left-hand side of the graph, which gives you the development of the olive oil prices. And of the extra virgin best olive oils. The price developments are rather flat, not a big change. Some change, but not a big change. Some change recently. So the cooking oil that the general population and the poor are consuming in the world has tripled in price, whereas the oil which we all cherish, the wonderful olive oil, especially the high quality one, which rich people consume, the price is flat. There's injustice in this world. You didn't need to learn this from this graph, but we need to be reflective of that. Healthy diet costs money, and we need to have large investment to facilitate access to healthy diet. And this is a stark situation, especially in the food price crisis, which we currently have. As you know, wheat prices are also up by about 200% because of the causes I mentioned. This is just one more documentation. Wheat from Ukraine and Russia is 30% of wheat trade, and maize is more than 15%. The importing low-income countries' consumers are suffering from that. So what to do about that? In closing, we must keep food and fertilizer markets open. Grain stocks must be released from the wealthy parts of the world who have stocks. Short-term changes in food production for reducing use for bioenergy and feed needs to be reduced. And we need to invest further in social protection. Why can low-income countries currently not afford to buy more food? Because they have gotten into deep debt situation. So they had to borrow money in order to feed their people during the COVID crisis. Now the prices are even higher, and they have this issue, not being able to finance their social protection and their nutrition programs to protect the poor. We need, in the long term, further investments in the food system, and I hope that your workshop boldly underlines the key role of good food, such as the olive, plays its role, and expanding of the olive economy, which currently is a niche economy in the food system, should be on our agenda. It doesn't need to be the product for the wealthy in the best food restaurant. Yesterday, I walked with Monsignor through the Vatican garden and took this picture. Briefly before that, we had the pleasure to briefly greet His Holiness Pope Benedict in the garden. I just want to close with this image and underline the olive means culture, religion, unique biology, farming people, food, culinary products, but it's also an economic and ecology issue, which we need to address. My message is all that, but the olive is at risk due to climate change and due to changing food system. I hope you assist this community as scientists and as activists and as producers to address these risks. Thank you for your attention.